There isn't much to be said after we parted. I returned to the Masked Moon sect. Once my sect gained footing in the state of Beliang, I snuck into the state of you to find you. However, the information I acquired was rather terrible. I only knew that you had been hunted down by the Ghost Spirit sect. The concrete details of the matter were unknown. Not long after, I was discovered by the Devil Dao and was forced to return to the Nine Nations Alliance. Afterwards, I never acquired information on you. I believed you dead and my inner demons with regards to you had gradually disappeared. Along the way, I managed to condense a nascent soul and smoothly became an elder of the Masked Moon sect. And here we are now. NangongWan spoke with a calm tone. Han Li's expression changed several times as he listened to NangongWan's unhurried explanation. In the past, she had done many things he was completely ignorant of, causing him to look upon her with even greater warmth. A moment later, Han Li couldn't help but ask, "What is this about Wei Lycan?" NangongWan coldly smiled. Wei Lycan. I unintentionally encountered him as he was traveling several years prior. I am not fond of him. He appears to be elegant and noble, but he is a thieving hypocrite and a philanderer. I heard that he secretly performs yin drawing techniques on each of his 8 female disciples. He most likely harbors ill intentions towards marrying me. That was why I refused his first request to marry me. Refuse? What changed? Han Li curiously asked. NangongWan didn't directly answer and suddenly asked, "Do you know of the 3 great nascent soul cultivators in the heavenly south?" Han Li's expression turned grim and faintly felt that something was amiss. Naturally. There is a late nascent soul cultivator in the righteous Dao, the devilish Dao, and the Nine Nations Alliance, each only a step away from entering deity transformation stage. This is how each of the 3 superpowers remain on equal footing. As for our heavenly Dao alliance, we have 2 mid-nascent soul stage Dao companions that are proficient in cooperative techniques. Together, they are capable of difficultly restraining a late nascent soul cultivator. What? Does Wei Lycan have to do with one of them? That's right. Wei Lycan's great uncle is Wei Wuya, one of these 3 great cultivators. As the highest-ranking elder of the Nine Nations Alliance, this Wei Wuya cultivates a rarely seen venomous cultivation art. With a sweep of his hand, he is able to take another life without any contact. His immense abilities are beyond imagination. NangongWan folded her fingers together and bitterly smiled. Han Li scowled and a malicious glint appeared from his eyes. Could it be that this Wei Wuya personally made things difficult for you? NangongWan wore an indignant expression. No, but Wei Wuya is definitely personally involved. You may not know this, but our sect's past great elder passed and was replaced with an old senior martial sister. Although her cultivation isn't weak, she is of shrewd mind and is normally at odds with me. Although we get along with our other elder, the relationship between us is awful. Han Li's expression grew sullen as NangongWan was about to mention the heart of the matter. After NangongWan gritted her teeth, she said, after refusing Wei Lycan's marriage request several times, Wei Lycan somewhat personally caused Wei Wuya to pay a visit to this senior martial sister of mine. Although I didn't know what the 2 spoke about, half a year later during an incarnation period of my female essence incarnation technique, she suddenly restrained me to force me into wedding Wei Lycan. After a moment of shock, he incredulously said, "Is your senior martial sister not sick in the mind? Using such a method to deal with a nascent soul cultivator of the same sect?" NangongWan smirked and mockingly said, "Isn't that the truth? I hadn't expected her to be crazed to this degree. However, it seems Wei Wuya's conditions were truly difficult to refuse. I later found out that so long as the Masked Moon sect agreed to this marriage, not only would the 6 sects expand out of the state of Beliang, but Wei Lycan would be willing to leave the Flowing Mind sect after marrying me and join the Masked Moon sect. For these 2 benefits at the price of 1, she acted without any hesitation. Regardless of my intentions, she released information that I was to be wed with Wei Lycan and prepared to hold a celebration, wishing to forcefully conclude the matter before it can be changed. If I wished to later back out, I would have no method of doing so. Han Li delightedly said, "So it turned out you hadn't agreed to this matter." These words of you deliberately wishing to marry came as a shock to me. NangongWan looked at Han Li and unhappily said, "I still have something I wish to ask you. Even after condensing a nascent soul for so many years, why is it that you haven't sought me out sooner? If you came a year earlier, this troublesome matter could have been avoided. It isn't that I didn't wish to see you, but rather," Han Li threw to give an explanation, but after a moment, he found this truly strange as well. Although Han Li faintly felt that Nangong Wan should have been someone that he truly cherished, for some unknown reason, he never thought to touch upon this feeling. If it weren't for news of Nangong Wan suddenly marrying, he feared that he still would have hesitated on this matter rather than directly confront these feelings. As Han Li's expression remained calm, Nangong Wan gracefully stood up and took several steps toward Han Li. She directly looked into his eyes and said, "In truth, my own circumstances are about the same as yours. Although our own experiences and abilities are far beyond that of mortals, we are fearful and unfamiliar towards our first venture of our emotions. Even if we have a deep impression of each other, we aren't a mortal pair after all. We cannot release all of our passions in an instant and have our emotions blaze like a star. For an optimal attitude for cultivation, cultivators have no option but to weaken our emotions and bury a majority of them. What is left behind is only an ordinary and flat relationship that is enduring. But when I heard that you were still alive, I felt more than happy and spent 2 days in careful consideration before eventually deciding to accept you in accordance to my feelings." After she said this with a soft tone, Nangong Wan extended her slender hand and grabbed Han Li's palm. After a moment of silence, Han Li placed his other hand on top. The soft sensation of her hand caused him to feel a trace of comfort. Nangong Wan blushed and she quickly pulled her hand away, bashfully glaring at Han Li in the process. Han Li didn't mind this and simply smiled. "Wan, although you are trapped here, from how calm you are, you should already have a plan for escape. Why else would you appear so worry-free?" When Nangong Wan heard this, she smiled and sly intent was betrayed from her eyes. "You're a quick thinker." "Yes, although I am under house arrest, only the sparse few in the upper echelons are aware of this matter. Ordinary disciples are completely ignorant. Else, I wouldn't have been able to directly receive a sound transmission talisman from Marshal Nephew Tang. However, many restrictions have been placed on my body in fear that I would flee. The other restrictions are of no matter to me as they were placed without knowledge of what amazing abilities I was capable of once I entered nascent soul stage. These common restrictions can be removed at any time, restoring my original cultivation. But there is one restriction that isn't easily dissolved. The heart restraint technique was personally placed on my body by that senior martial sister. This technique was something that she prepared from a record. If I was unwilling to agree to the marriage, she'd be able to use this technique to temporarily control me. She even used her own blood essence to place down the restriction, creating a restriction talisman that serves as the crucial point of the restriction. Through the use of this restriction medallion, I will not be able to escape her control within 50 kilometers of her unless it is destroyed. Fortunately, there is too great a gap between our cultivation and she is only able to control me to perform a few simple movements. She will have no control over my body's magic power." Han Li curiously asked, "Then your plan was to?" Nangong Wan softly smiled and chuckled. She said with a worryless tone, "I originally thought to restore my magic power when security was the lightest, several days before the ceremony was about to take place. Afterwards, I would immediately flee far away. So long as I am outside of the restriction talisman's range, she cannot control me. But since you're here now, I'll leave this matter to you. After all, you are the man that wishes to marry me. From what I've heard, you were able to easily defeat a cultivator of a similar grade. You should be quite skilled." Han Li frowned and muttered, "Heart restraint technique? That restriction is truly troublesome. Are there other methods of dissolving it apart from destroying the medallion?" Nangong Wan's bright eyes flickered and she carelessly said, "Even if there isn't, leave it be. We'll be far away from the masked moon sect anyhow." Han Li's eyes narrowed and a cold glint flickered from his eyes. He imposingly said, "It's fine. Isn't it just a restriction talisman? It should be in your senior martial sister's grasp. I can simply go and fetch it. I'll be able to vent some anger on your behalf as well." Nangong Wan shook her head and pursed her lips in a smile, revealing a trace of mischievousness. "I was merely saying it to test your intentions. I truly had no intention of having you go and take the restriction talisman. My senior martial sister is a mid-nascent soul cultivator and possesses abilities beyond that of early nascent soul cultivators like us. Let us sneak away stealthily. At worst, I'll just spend another 10 years whittling away at the formation." Han Li grew silent. The time for him to be united with this otherworldly woman was soon to come. Han Li smiled and confidently said, "No matter. Let us first see how it goes. If it doesn't succeed, we can make our escape. With me around, I'll be able to bring you out regardless of the restrictions on your body. After studying at Hanli for a while, she seemed to understand that there was no changing his mind. She bit her lips and said, "This. Fine. Although I don't know how vast your abilities are, you should be somewhat skilled given your confidence. But there is no need for you to take the initiative to go find her. My senior martial sister's residence is layered with restrictions, so I'll draw her here instead. Afterwards, we'll be able to draw assistance from the restrictions to capture her while her guard is down." After a brief moment of thought, Hanli smiled and said that his method is truly more reliable. "However, can you still use the restrictions on your cave residence?" When I arrived, it appeared that the restrictions were shattered. NangongWan quickly replied, "No worries. Although a few of the surface restrictions have been shattered by my senior martial sister, there is still one very formidable hidden restriction that she has yet to discover. It can still be used." Hanli rubbed his chin and said, "Good. Since we can use that, I also have several spell formation toolsets. Although they aren't powerful, after they are placed, they will be able to provide a certain level of impedance." Having heard Hanli, NangongWan became more confident. "You have formation flags? All the better. We cannot delay. I will need half a day to remove the restrictions on my body and restore my magic power. You should start placing down the spell formations during that time." After a moment of thought, Hanli puzzlingly asked, "If we manage to restrain your senior martial sister, can't you take control of the Masked Moon sect? That way, we wouldn't have to flee." After a moment of surprise, NangongWan shook her head. "That won't be possible. Apart from our senior martial sister, there is one other nascent soul cultivator. Although my relationship with him is good, he certainly won't allow me to take the title of Grand Elder illegitimately. I also have no desire for a power struggle. I only want a peaceful place where I can quietly cultivate." Hanli shook his head and coldly smiled. "If that's the case, then leave it be. If this succeeds smoothly, you can follow me back to the Drifting Cloud sect. Even if the Nine Nations Union were stronger and Wei Wuya heavily doted on Wei Lycan, he wouldn't dare to rashly offend the Heavenly Dao Alliance along with 2 nascent soul cultivators during an invasion of spell warriors." Soon after, he slapped the storage pouch at his waist and flipped his hand, summoning a pile of formation flags and formation plates. When NangongWan saw this, she faintly smiled and sat back down. With her eyes closed, she formed an odd incantation seal with her hands. A short moment later, her snow-white clothes began to emit a scarlet-red flame. It reached a meter tall and enveloped NangongWan. Hanli then set into motion. His body blurred and circled around the hall, placing down formation flags and plates all over the hall. Radiance of various colors briefly shone before sinking deep into the hall and disappearing from sight. Arranging the formations took little time, but in order for the spell formations to display as much power as possible, Hanli had the spell formations cover only the area of the hall. Additionally, he also placed the spell formations so that they would remain hidden unless they were meticulously searched for. These formation flags and plates were all something Hanli had refined during his time as a core formation stage cultivator. They lacked even the power to deal with core formation cultivators, let alone nascent soul cultivators. Hanli didn't have much hope for them. After placing down all the spell formations, he muttered to himself and suddenly swept his sleeve. A streak of white light shot out from his buff and flew a circle around Hanli before dropping down in front Hanli, revealing itself to be small white fox. Silvermoon beamed and said, "Master, are you not scared that you'll make Mistress Nangong jealous by summoning me?" Hanli raised his brows and glared at the small fox. "Humph! Who'd get jealous over an artifact spirit like you? I will be facing a mid-nascent soul stage cultivator soon, and I cannot allow her to flee. Although I have some restrictions assisting me, I will also need you to help. A mid-nascent soul cultivator is incomparable to an early nascent soul cultivator. It will be difficult to overcome her even while using all my power." Silvermoon swiftly replied, "Master, how do you plan on having this servant assist you?" Hanli took something out from his storage pouch and handed it over to Silvermoon. "It's simple. Use this treasure during a suitable moment. You cannot allow her to escape." Silvermoon clasped the item with her claw and incredulously said, "You're letting me use this?" Hanli calmly said, "Right. If you're controlling this item, you should be able to display even more of its might than I can. And I would consume magic power by using this item, so it'd be better to let you use it. Of course, you will only be able to use this for a short time. After all, artifact spirits aren't able to control other treasures for a long period of time." Silvermoon lowered her head and dejectedly said, "Silvermoon understands." At the same time, she rubbed the object several times as if she were fond of it. When Han Li saw this, he felt his heart stir. After Silver Moon grasped this item, her entire body flickered with silver light and she disappeared into the ground. Afterwards, Han Li walked several circles around the hall and suddenly raised his head to look at the ceiling with sudden inspiration. After muttering to himself for a moment, he tossed his spirit beast pouch into the air and summoned a large swarm of black-tainted gold-devouring beetles. They revolved above him as a 3-meter-wide cloud. Han Li took a deep breath and blew an azure mist onto the cloud. With his 2 hands in an incantation seal, he softly uttered an incantation and the insect cloud buzzed for a moment before transforming into specks of starlight. The specks of light then floated up to the ceiling and disappeared with flickers of azure light, completely masking their aura. Han Li narrowed his eyes and stared at the ceiling for a moment more. Having sensed nothing obvious, he nodded his head in satisfaction. Having laid this all down, Han Li turned his gaze to NangongWan. At that moment, the flames on her body wandered and shifted until they took the shape of a round red disc that strangely pulsed with light. The changes in the flame also influenced the spiritual qi in the hall, causing it to grow restless. Han Li frowned at the sight. After some thought, he struck a nearby stone pillar with a spell seal and caused a layer of azure barrier to suddenly appear with NangongWan at its center. Soon, the spiritual qi around the hall returned to normal. When Han Li saw this, he smiled and extended his arm, summoning a straw chair into his grasp. He then casually took a seat across from NangongWan and silently stared at her. With such a good opportunity to glance at her captivating face, he naturally wanted to take a good look at the woman he yearned for many years. Not long after, Han Li became entranced and his expression grew lax. But soon, Han Li's figure abruptly disappeared without warning. The woman who had been spying from outside the hall was alarmed by this. Cursing inwardly, she immediately attempted to flee. But she was too slow as she heard Han Li's calm voice from behind her. "Why are you spying on us? Are you not scared your martial ancestor will rebuke you?" Not daring to turn her head, she stuttered, I wasn't spying. It was just that martial ancestor hasn't emerged after such a long time, so I grew worried." This was the yellow-robed woman who had led Han Li into the hall. At that moment, she already sensed a huge pressure appear behind her, compelling her to give her apprehensive explanation. With his hands behind his back, he stared at the young woman emotionlessly said, "Oh, really? Since you only wish to take a look, why is it that you've hid yourself so thoroughly? You even used such a rare high-grade talisman as a concealing spirit talisman. How did a meager foundation establishment cultivator like you get your hands on that?" In the young woman's alarm, Han Li coldly said, "There is no need for any further explanation. You will obediently follow me back. Once your martial ancestor finishes, she will decide how to deal with you." Once the yellow-robed woman heard this, she grew fearful and instantly squeezed the talisman in her other hand. Her body flashed with yellow light and she shot down the corridor in an attempt to escape. Han Li coldly stared at her but made no move to pursue her. Once she traveled about 30 meters, a nearby wall suddenly spat a cloud of pink mist which enveloped her. The light surrounding the young woman's body scattered, and her body swayed several times before falling to the ground. In a flicker of yellow light, Silver Moon emerged from the wall and gracefully shook her tail several times before walking up to the young woman with a smile. Setting Sun Hall was the residence for the Great Elder for many successive generations of the Masked Moon sect. Not only was a spirit well placed there, but the hall was also heavily layered with restrictions. Apart from a few other elders, none are able to easily approach the hall without the permission of the Great Elder. At that moment, a streak of red light flew across the horizon. It revolved several times around Setting Sun Hall and was able to enter without obstruction. The red light passed through several layers of restrictions as if they weren't there, and entered a side room after taking a few turns. Inside the room was a woman of graceful beauty meditating on a prayer mat. Her skin seemed icily pale, and her age appeared to be in her early 20s. Her body faintly emitted an icy qi. In the instant the red light appeared before the woman, she slowly opened her eyes and frowned. She beckoned to the red light and it then dropped down into the woman's hand in a fist-sized ball of red light. The icy woman stared at the flame and expressionlessly flipped her hand, extinguishing it. "What is that girl planning? Taking the initiative to see me? But since her tone is so gentle, I better have a look." In a swift and decisive manner, the woman quickly flew off in a streak of white light and instantly flew out of Setting Sun Hall. Not long after, the woman arrived in front of NangongWan's cave residence. She descended onto the ground and examined her surroundings. It appeared ordinary and the restrictions outside the cave residence were still damaged beyond use. Having noticed nothing strange, she walked towards the cave residence with confidence and struck the stone door with a white spell seal, opening it of its own accord. The pale woman then calmly walked in without a word. "I pay my respects to martial ancestor." A young, yellow-clothed woman that was standing behind the stone door immediately saluted the icy woman as soon as she appeared. The icy woman took a casual glance at her and indifferently said, "It seems your cultivation has progressed since the last time I saw you. It seems you should have already taken those medicine pills I've given you." She then began to slowly walk deeper into the cave residence. The yellow-clothed woman lowered her head and quickly replied, "Many thanks for the medicine, martial ancestor. This disciple wouldn't have progressed so quickly without it. It is good that you know. Has junior martial sister Nangong taken any strange actions in her cave residence? Tell me, has junior martial sister Nangong been taking any strange actions lately?" The young woman obediently said, "Nothing much. Apart from seeing a sect disciple today, she hasn't done anything else." "No. She hasn't done anything today apart from meeting with a disciple." The young woman spoke meticulously. "Your martial uncle Lan already told me about this from a sound transmission talisman. What gift did that disciple bring? Has he already left?" That disciple was merely a low-grade steward in the sect. He had already left a few hours ago. After martial ancestor Nangong received the gift, she actually seemed somewhat unhappy. The icy woman's expression stirred upon hearing this. "Oh? What kind of gift was it that made her unhappy?" The yellow-clothed woman further lowered her head and uttered each word with deliberation. "It was simply a silver sword magic tool." Martial ancestor Nangong felt ill at ease upon seeing it. After pondering for a moment, the icy woman's face revealed a trace of astonishment and said, "It most likely came from a vagrant cultivator that junior martial sister Nangong had befriended while she was traveling. This isn't anything too strange. Martial ancestor's words are certainly true." When martial ancestor Nangong received the silver sword, she became pensive for a long while. Afterwards, she decided to send a voice transmission talisman to martial ancestor. The icy woman curiously mused, "It is truly surprising that this was able to change her mind." She then casually ordered, "In the future, continue to pay attention to junior martial sister Nangong's actions. With her restricted cultivation, the high-grade talisman I have should allow you to spy on her undetected. So long as you perform well in this task, I will compensate you with vast rewards." By the time that was said, the two had already arrived outside the main hall. "As you command, martial ancestor. Martial ancestor Nangong should be waiting for you in the hall ahead." The yellow-clothed woman spoke softly and led the way to the hall's entrance. The icy woman originally thought to be cautious out of habit and examining her surroundings before entering the hall. However, when she arrived in front of the hall, she heard NangongWan's voice from within, "Senior martial sister. Come in. I've thought about the matter, and I am able to reluctantly agree, on one condition. You need to make a promise." Her voice sounded exceptionally calm. The icy woman was pleasantly surprised and walked in without further thought. She spoke in a pleasant tone, "Junior martial sister Nangong. It is great that you finally came to a realization. So long as you agree to marry the Flowing Mind Sect's elder Wei, I will agree to any condition that you raise. With the assistance from Wei Wuya, our Masked Moon sect will soon flourish." After she spoke, the entire hall entered her view. NangongWan was sitting in a straw chair and was holding a crudely refined silver sword in her hand. It was held across her body and she was carefully examining it. It was as if she hadn't spoken just a moment ago. When the icy woman saw this, she stepped forward and walking into the large hall. A trace of bewilderment appeared on her face and she thought to ask NangongWan something more, but suddenly, her expression abruptly changed and her arm shot backwards at the speed of lightning. She shot 5-inch-long sword lights from her fingers towards where the yellow-clothed woman was standing. When the yellow-clothed woman faced this attack, a strange smile suddenly appeared on her face. The woman's body suddenly sunk into the stone in a flash of yellow light, leaving only tatters of her yellow clothes behind. She immediately shot towards the hall with her body clad in light upon seeing this fantastical earth evasion technique. But once she made her way to the exit, she heard a whistle approaching her. A 10-meter-long azure sword was fiercely shooting towards her in an attempt to cleave her in half. Her expression had vastly changed. With a sudden flick of her fingers, 10-foot-long streaks of icy light shot out and struck the huge sword. The streaks of white light met the sword in a series of loud bangs. The impact of the strikes caused both the huge sword and the woman to recoil. The icy woman retreated about 10 meters before coming to a stop. The huge azure sword dimmed and diverged into several tens of flying swords that began to circle in place. Gradually, a silhouette appeared from within the revolving swords, revealing a youth with a common appearance. He gazed at the woman with a faint smile. When the woman clearly saw Han Li's true cultivation, her pupils shrank. She coldly said, "What is going on?" "Junior Marshal Sister Nangong, who is he and what was that doppelganger of you?" The woman immediately reached at her waist and took out a red command medallion. Han Li shifted his gaze towards the command medallion and sullenly said, "The restriction medallion." With a cold snort, she hastily said, "As expected, Junior Marshal Nangong has told you everything. I don't know who you are, but these matters are the affairs of the Masked Moon sect. You had best stand down, or our 6 sects will hunt you down." Having already placed away the silver sword from before, she gracefully stood up and coldly said, "There is no need for Senior Marshal Sister to speak such frightening words. I am not without friends in the 6 sects. If they knew what Senior Marshal Sister did to a fellow sect member, would she receive the blade? And while you are able to activate the heart restriction technique with that command medallion, do you believe that I will give you the opportunity to use it?" Soon after, NangongWan spat out a ring of flame, her magic treasure, the vermilion bird band. A sinister glint flickered from the icy woman's eyes when she heard this. She had no intention of retreating against Han Li and wore a resentful expression on her face. She suddenly shook her sleeves and tossed out a streak of white and black light, 2 flying swords. They revolved once around her and they suddenly grew in size, extending to 3 meters in length. The white flying sword was as pure as snow and emitted a bone-chilling icy chi. As for the black flying sword, it possessed a fantastical heat and occasionally flickered with black flame. There were a rare pair of yin-yang swords. The woman coldly laughed and lightly shook the red command medallion in her head and muttered a few words into it. Red light immediately flickered from it, slowly covering it in a layer of light. Closely observing her actions, Han Li instantly attempted to interrupt her without another thought. The small silver bell had already revolved around his head. Under the command of Han Li's incantation gesture, the bell began to ring, striking at her with silver sound waves. At nearly the same time, Han Li rolled his hands together, sending a streak of red and a streak of azure light towards some nearby pillars in the hall. As the hall's restrictions were activated, the ground trembled. Threads of red and azure lights began to emerge from all over the hall and followed after the silver sound waves, engulfing the icy woman at their center. In the face of these oncoming attacks, the woman simply pointed to her 2 swords. Black and white light flashed from the swords as they easily spun once in the air, instantly releasing a wave of glacial and scorching chi. With the white icy chi on the outside, and the black scorching chi on the inside, they conformed into a strange barrier of light around the woman. When the sound waves struck the barrier, they were entirely absorbed without a trace. But soon after, the red and azure lights from the hall's restrictions had managed to envelop it. NangongWan took action at that moment. In a burst of flame, the vermilion bird band turned into a huge fireball and suddenly exuded a vast pressure. Then with a casual wave of hand, a dim scarlet light flashed from her hand and she vanished from sight. Were it not for Han Li's vast spiritual sense, he wouldn't have been seen through NangongWan's sneak attack. Following a muffled hum, the dim light suddenly revealed it in a colorful burst. With furious alarm bared on her face, she said, "To think that you would use a devil-slaying thorn to injure me. Well done. I had always thought that Junior Marshal Sister had used all of them. I hadn't expected that you managed to preserve one." The woman appeared to have somehow suffered a heavy blow, but her vitality still held strong. Han Li knew that she merely suffered a minor injury and that NangongWan simply intended to interrupt the icy woman's use of the restriction medallion. After Han Li activated the restrictions in the hall, he flipped his hand and the pitch-black 1,000-layer mountain in his hand. He tossed it into the air and quickly struck the mountain with quickly formed spell seals. Appearing momentarily trapped by the restrictions, the vermilion bird band shot towards the icy woman as a ball of flames. But in that instant, 8 ferocious arm-thick flame pythons became tangled with it. A roaring sea of flames soon appeared in the hall. At that point, the mountain had expanded to 20 meters in height. Just as Han Li was about to command the treasure, he saw a bowl-thick beam of rainbow light shoot out from the sea of flames. Be it flame or light, anything that was struck by the beam of light were unable to resist it. Clank suddenly rang out, and the beam of light had abruptly stopped on the spiraling vermilion band ring and completely locked it down. The light stasis mirror. Han Li narrowed his eyes with a solemn expression. Before the woman arrived, NangongWan gave Han Li a general explanation of her senior martial sister's techniques and treasures to Han Li, allowing him more opportunities for Han Li to strike her. The light stasis mirror was the ancient treasure that NangongWan has mentioned the most amongst her senior martial sister's treasures, and was also among the most fantastical of them. The azure stasis mirror that Han Li saw during the trial by blood and fire was most likely a replica of this ancient treasure. Although it only possessed 1/100th of its power, the magic tool was still renowned amongst low-grade cultivators as a magic tool that was amongst the best. The azure restrictions and the flames had been thrown into chaos by the light beam's overwhelming power, rendering them completely ineffective. As a result, the icy woman reappeared once more. Within her black-white barriers, she held a mirror in one hand and formed an incantation gesture with the other. Han Li's gaze flickered and fell onto famous mirror that was in her hand. The mirror wasn't large and appeared the same as the azure stasis mirror. However, a pitch-black light shined from its body that left a deeply eerie impression on those who saw it. As for the rainbow beam of light that it emitted, it created such a harsh contrast it made from a bizarre sight. The hand that formed an incantation gesture was bloodstained, and the restriction medallion that it originally held had disappeared without a trace. It was truly unfathomable how she was injured through the barrier. This devil-slaying thorn was quite effective. With NangongWan's bonded magic treasure was restrained by the mirror, Han Li wasn't about idly stand by. He silently pointed to the black mountain and had it disappear with a faint tremble. A short moment later, it reappeared above the icy woman and began to fall with tremendous momentum. The woman scoffed and slightly adjusted the direction of her light stasis mirror while striking it with a spell seal from her free hand. Suddenly, the existing beam of light faintly trembled and a slimmer branching beam shot out from the mirror towards the black mountain. Surpassing the speed of sound, the beam pierced through the air in an attempt to restrain the falling the black mountain. Already prepared that he wouldn't be able to easily succeed, he clutched his hands together in an incantation gesture without further thought. The falling black mountain suddenly stopped in the air and revolved once before expelling a large cloud of black light from underneath it, just in time to interrupt the beam of light before it struck. The black cloud of light engulfed the beam of rainbow light as soon as it had appeared, flowed down to strike the icy woman's barrier. The black layer of the barrier trembled and began to throw her body's spiritual chi into disarray, nearly causing the beams of light from the mirror to scatter. The woman's silhouette grew dim from behind the barrier of light and her expression faintly changed. She opened her mouth and spat out a mist of azure chi onto the mirror without further thought. With the reinforced power, the rainbow light dissipated into a mist and stopped the black mountain and its aura from descending further. The confrontation between the two forces eventually resulted in a series of muffled explosions. NangongWan's spirits were roused by the sight of the deadlock, and she suddenly willed the restricted vermilion bird ring to vastly fluctuate in size. It screamed with phoenix cries as it attempted its utmost to break free. For a time, the two joined hands to withstand NangongWan's senior martial sister. Of course, the three weren't simply maintaining this deadlock, they were also observing each other's actions. Han Li was the first to move, slapping at his waist and summoning a spirit beast pouch. With a loud buzz, countless sparkling golden beetles surged through the air and formed a malevolent golden cloud. NangongWan followed by uttering an incantation in the cadence of an otherworldly song. A huge scarlet barrier suddenly appeared a meter above her head. The barrier glowed with fluid light that gradually grew intensively bright. The icy woman suddenly tossed the mirror in her hand above her and slapped her hands together, summoning a small triangular flag into her grasp. Despite her preparations, she still gloomily said, "Divine Incarnation Light. Junior Marshal Nangong, you truly aren't holding back. You dare to use this." Although she found the golden insect swarm to be somewhat strange, she paid them little heed. She was clearly unfamiliar with the gold-devouring beetles. Wearing a faint smile on her face, NangongWan said, "If Senior Marshal Sister doesn't wish to fight with her life on the line, then hand over the contraining heart restriction medallion and leave us be." The icy woman snorted and malicious intent appeared on her face. She then opened her mouth and spat out a small blood-red sword. The sword was only several inches long, but its body glistened with blinding red light and a thread of black chi faintly wandered around the sword's body. As soon as the sword appeared, the sword began to tremble of its own volition, filling the air in the hall with the scent of blood. The smile disappeared from NangongWan's face with the appearance of the small crimson sword, and she icily stared at her senior martial sister, Blood Devil Sword. "Since when did you acquire that evil treasure? Are you not scared of the devilish chi backlash?" "Backlash? Have no worry. With this artifact, I will defeat you so quickly there won't be any opportunity for any devilish chi backlash. But now, I will ask you one last time. Are you truly unwilling to marry Wei Lycan for the prosperity of the sect? If you are still unwilling, I will have the Blood Devil Sword go mad. I am not entirely confident of my ability to restrain its power. Do not blame me for not warning you. The icy woman's voice was brimming with certainty. Han Li glanced at the Blood Devil saber without much care and calmly said, "There is no need for you to ask any questions. Even if Wan was willing to sacrifice herself for the Masked Moon sect, I would not allow it. You will cease this foolishness. And who are you? It seems your cultivation and abilities aren't weak, but I don't recall a nascent soul that compares with your description. Could it be you are a newly ascended nascent soul cultivator? But to call her in such a sappy manner as Wan? You must be the reason she had been unwilling to marry Wei Lycan all along." With a cold glint shining for her eyes, Nangong Wan's senior martial sister stared at Han Li with murderous intent.